Growing up in a family where favoritism was as blatant as the sun rising every morning, I, Alex Carter, learned early on that fairness was a concept my parents never bothered to understand. My younger brother, Joshua Carter, was the golden child, flawed, reckless, and yet endlessly praised, while I was the invisible one, the one who had to fight for every scrap of acknowledgement. From the moment I could hold a pencil, I realized that success wasn't something handed to me, it was something I had to claw my way toward, often with bloodied hands and a heavy heart. The disparity between us was glaring. Joshua dropped out of community college after just one semester, but instead of criticism, he received pats on the back and reassurances that he's figuring things out. Meanwhile, when I struggled to balance part-time jobs, scholarships, and tuition payments, I was told to be more mature and stop complaining. Once, during high school, I broke my arm playing football, a freak accident, and still got scolded for missing practice. Joshua, on the other hand, flunked every class and was rewarded with a trip to Florida because, apparently, he needed a break. It wasn't just about money or resources, it was about belief. My parents, especially my father Robert Carter, believed in Joshua no matter what. For me? They barely noticed I existed unless they needed something. Despite the suffocating weight of their indifference, I refused to let it crush me. Instead, I poured everything I had into my education. I worked late-night shifts at the campus cafe, tutored classmates until midnight, and lived off discount noodles while skipping every party, every social event, every chance to feel like a normal college kid. Every scholarship I earned felt like a lifeline, every A on my transcript a silent scream saying, "Look at me. I'm here." But they never did. Not really. After 5 grueling years, I finally graduated from Oak Haven, one of the most prestigious public universities in the state. I wanted to celebrate, not just for myself, but to show them that I had made it despite their neglect. I spent nearly all the money I had left booking a small restaurant patio, filling it with food, balloons, and even hiring a musician, a guy with a guitar whose voice carried real emotion. I invited everyone, my mom, Margaret Carter, my aunt and uncle, Richard and Susan, my little cousins Emily and Ben, and, of course, my dad. Joshua didn't come, he rarely did, but somehow his absence loomed larger than anyone else's presence. The night started normally enough. People laughed, clinked glasses, and ate the food I had painstakingly arranged. But then, my father stood up, beer bottle in hand, wearing that same crumpled fishing shirt he always wore, and began speaking as if he were giving a toast. His words hit me like a freight train. "You don't deserve the success," he said, his voice steady, almost cold. "Joshua does." The room froze. Utensils stopped clinking. Laughter died mid-sentence. Even the musician paused mid-strum, leaving an eerie silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. My father blinked slowly, as if unsure whether he'd actually said those words aloud. But I knew exactly what he meant. He wasn't just dismissing my accomplishment, he was erasing it entirely, replacing it with someone else's name. For years, I had waited for him to say he was proud of me. To see me. To acknowledge that I mattered. That moment shattered any lingering hope I had left. Without hesitation, I lifted my glass, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Great. Then let Joshua pay your bills." My voice was calm, steady, but laced with a quiet fury that silenced the room even further. Everyone heard me. Everyone understood. A few people exchanged glances, some nodded subtly, recognizing the truth behind my words. I set the glass down gently, grabbed my coat, and walked out without looking back. No explanations. No goodbyes. Just the sound of my footsteps fading into the night. I drove aimlessly for hours, anger and pain swirling inside me like a storm. Eventually, I found myself at Lookout Point, a place I used to visit as a teenager when the world felt too big and my problems too overwhelming. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and rolled down the windows, letting the cold air fill the space around me. Sitting there under the starless sky, I realized something I should have known long ago: my parents would never believe in me. They would never see me as anything more than the shadow of the sun they truly wanted. It was painful, yes, but also strangely liberating. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to imagine a future without them, a future where I didn't have to prove my worth to anyone. As I sat in my car at Lookout Point, staring into the darkness, memories began flooding back like a dam had burst inside me. Memories I had buried deep, packed away so tightly that they wouldn't resurface and ruin my carefully constructed sense of peace. But now, with the weight of my father's words still heavy on my chest, there was no escaping them. It wasn't just about tonight, it never had been. It was about years of imbalance, years where every effort I made was met with silence or criticism while Joshua's failures were celebrated as victories. Take, for instance, the time I broke my arm during high school football practice. It wasn't even my fault. I tripped over another player's cleats, but instead of sympathy, all I got was blame. My dad scolded me for missing practice, saying I should have been more careful. Meanwhile, when Joshua flunked every single one of his classes later that year, he didn't face punishment. Instead, our parents sent him to Florida to clear his head. Clear his head? He hadn't done anything but fail, yet somehow, he deserved a vacation while I was left to pick up the pieces of my own life without so much as an encouraging word. And then there was the tuition statement, a moment etched permanently into my mind. It happened during my third year of college. I had gone home for the weekend, something I rarely did because being around them always felt suffocating. While unpacking some groceries, I noticed a piece of paper sitting casually on the kitchen counter. At first glance, it seemed innocuous enough, a bill, maybe, but when I picked it up, my stomach dropped. It was Joshua's tuition statement, marked as fully paid by my parents. I stood there, frozen, staring at the numbers. Every semester, I had scrambled to cobble together scholarships, part-time jobs, and student loans just to stay enrolled. I worked graveyard shifts at the campus cafe, skipped meals to save money, and spent countless nights studying until my eyes burned. And here was proof, cold and undeniable, that they had chosen to support him, not me. Not the son who had sacrificed everything to succeed. At the time, I didn't say anything. What could I say? Confrontation would only lead to defensiveness, excuses, or worse, outright denial. So I tucked the knowledge away, letting it fester like a wound I couldn't clean. Now, sitting alone in the dark, that memory came rushing back with a vengeance. But tonight wasn't just about old wounds, it was about what came next. After leaving the restaurant, I thought cutting ties might feel liberating. In reality, it felt messy, like ripping off a bandage before the skin underneath had healed. For days after the dinner, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts from my mom, Margaret. She pleaded with me, saying things like, "Your dad didn't mean it," or "You're overreacting." Overreacting? Was I supposed to laugh off the fact that he publicly declared I wasn't worthy of my own success? Then came the voicemail from Robert, left at 2:43 a.m., when most people are either sleeping or too drunk to think clearly. His voice was slow, deliberate, almost mocking. "What's your deal?" he started, as if this entire mess was somehow my fault. "You've always acted like you were above us, like the world owed you something just because you were around. Sure, you finished your degree. Good for you. But don't pretend you did it all on your own. You come from us, and sooner or later, you'll return to where you came from." His words hit me like shards of glass, sharp and cutting, but not because they hurt, they confirmed what I already knew. They weren't proud of me. They never had been. To them, I was disposable, someone who existed only to prop up their image of perfection through Joshua. That realization pushed me to make a decision I'd avoided for far too long. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and began blocking everyone. First, my dad, then my mom, then Joshua, and finally the group chat that only remembered I existed when they needed something. Each name I blocked felt like shedding a layer of armor I no longer needed. The hardest part wasn't the act itself, it was accepting that I might never hear from them again. No explanations, no apologies, no attempts to understand why I left. Just silence. Yet, strangely, that silence brought a kind of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. 2 weeks later, I moved to a new city. I sold off most of my belongings online, packed the rest into boxes, and handed over the keys to my old apartment. The lease went to a coworker who needed a place. I bought a cheap prepaid phone, changed my number, and started fresh. My new apartment was small, barely furnished, but it was mine. Every item I unpacked felt like a declaration, "This is who I am now." I hung my diploma on the wall above my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that I had achieved something extraordinary despite them. That I had carried the weight of my dreams alone and emerged victorious. The first few weeks in my new apartment felt strange, almost surreal. The silence was overwhelming at times, no familiar voices criticizing or comparing me to Joshua, no guilt-laden expectations hanging over my head. It was just me and the empty space, a blank canvas waiting for me to fill it with something meaningful. I didn't have much furniture yet, just a mattress on the floor, a folding chair, and a small table I'd bought secondhand. But every day, I added something new, a lamp here, a bookshelf there. Each item felt like another step toward reclaiming myself. Cooking became my therapy. For years, meals had been rushed affairs, eaten alone while scrolling through emails or cramming for exams. Now, I took my time. One evening, after unpacking an old box of kitchen supplies, I decided to make dinner, not out of necessity but because I wanted to enjoy the process. I roasted vegetables until they caramelized, baked garlic bread that filled the tiny apartment with its warm aroma, and tossed together a simple pasta dish. Sitting at the table I'd assembled piece by piece, I realized how long it had been since I'd truly savored food without worrying about someone judging me for what I chose to eat. Art followed soon after. During one late-night unpacking session, I stumbled upon notebooks labeled miscellaneous. Inside were sketchbooks I hadn't touched in years. Flipping through them brought back memories of a younger version of myself, the boy who used to doodle in class, dreaming of becoming an artist someday. That night, I picked up a pencil and started drawing again. No pressure to impress anyone, no fear of being watched. Just lines and shapes spilling onto paper, reconnecting me with a part of myself I thought I'd lost forever. Then came Thomas Reed, my neighbor. He showed up one afternoon holding a six-pack of beer, saying he'd noticed me moving in and figured we could use some company. At first, I hesitated. He reminded me too much of family gatherings, where conversations always seemed to circle back to judgment. But Thomas wasn't like that. He invited me to his weekly game nights, introducing me to his friends. They never asked invasive questions or tried to reshape who I was, they simply liked spending time with me. Slowly, I began to trust him, even confiding bits of my past during quiet moments over drinks. Laura Bennett entered my life differently. She was browsing books at the same store where I worked part-time. When she asked what I was reading, our conversation flowed naturally, leading to coffee dates and eventually deeper connections. Laura wasn't perfect, she carried her own scars, but she understood pain in a way that made her presence comforting rather than suffocating. Together, we built something real, untainted by the games and manipulation I'd grown accustomed to with my family. But not everything was smooth sailing. One Sunday afternoon, as I returned from the grocery store, I saw a car parked outside my building, a car I recognized instantly. It belonged to Margaret, my mother. My heart sank as I approached the entrance, finding her standing there, clutching a letter in trembling hands. "Your father isn't doing well," she said softly, her voice breaking. He misses you." For a moment, I froze. Part of me wanted to believe her words, to rush back home and fix whatever was wrong. But another part, the stronger part, knew better. This wasn't about concern, it was about control. If I opened that door, I'd be letting them back into my life, undoing all the progress I'd made. I stared at her, searching for any sign of sincerity. There was none. Instead, I turned around, walked inside, and closed the door behind me without uttering a word. The sound echoed through the hallway, final and unyielding. That night, I hung my diploma on the wall above my desk. Not as a trophy or proof of achievement but as a reminder, to myself, that I had earned this life on my own terms. As the weeks turned into months, my life began to feel less like a cautious experiment and more like something solid, something real. Laura had become more than just someone I shared coffee with, she was my anchor, my safe harbor. We spent hours talking about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, the scars we carried from people who were supposed to love us but didn't know how. She listened without judgment, offering gentle advice when I needed it most. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "You've changed," she said softly, a small smile playing on her lips. Not in a bad way. Just lighter. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. For years, I had been carrying the weight of expectations that weren't mine to bear. Now, for the first time, I could breathe freely. Thomas, too, had become an integral part of this new life. His easygoing nature and unwavering support reminded me that not all friendships came with strings attached. He introduced me to his circle of friends, people who accepted me as I was, no questions asked. Together, they filled the void left by my family, not by replacing them, but by showing me what healthy relationships looked like. But even in this newfound peace, shadows of the past occasionally crept back. One sunny Sunday afternoon, as I walked home from the coffee shop holding a warm loaf of sourdough and 2 iced drinks, one for me, one for Laura, I froze mid-step. Parked near the entrance of my building was a car I hadn't seen in nearly a year. My mom's car. It sat there silently, as if unsure whether it belonged. Margaret stood beside it, gripping what appeared to be a letter in her trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the windows of my apartment building, searching for any sign of me. When she finally spotted me standing frozen halfway down the block, her face lit up briefly, then fell. She called out my name, her voice cracking with emotion. For a moment, I considered walking over. Maybe hearing her out would bring some closure. But as I approached, memories flooded back, the dismissive remarks, the endless comparisons, the crushing silence when I needed support the most. I stopped a few feet away, meeting her gaze steadily. "Alex," she pleaded, holding out the letter. "Please. Just read this." I didn't take it. Instead, I turned and walked past her, my footsteps deliberate, my expression calm. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Forgiveness wasn't the same as reconciliation, and I knew letting her back in, even for a moment, would undo everything I'd worked so hard to build. That night, as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Laura greeted me at the door, wearing one of my oversized sweaters, her hair tied up in a messy bun. The smell of garlic and herbs wafted through the air, mingling with the soft notes of jazz playing in the background. "I saved you dinner," she said, handing me a plate piled high with roasted vegetables and pasta. "You look like you need it." We ate together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone truly sees you. Later, sitting on the couch under the glow of fairy lights strung along the walls, I realized something profound. Happiness wasn't about erasing pain, it was about finding joy despite it. A week later, another message arrived. This time, it was from Robert. Sent late at night, the tone was slow and deliberate, almost mocking. "You think you're better than us now," he wrote. "Living your little life, pretending you don't owe anything to anyone. You're still ours, Alex. Don't forget that." Reading those words, I felt nothing, no anger, no hurt, just a faint sense of pity. They weren't talking about me anymore. Their words were echoes of a narrative I had long since left behind. It's strange how the things that once consumed your mind can fade into silence without you even noticing. For years, I carried the weight of my family's expectations, their indifference, and their inability to see me for who I truly was. But now, sitting in my cozy apartment with a steaming cup of coffee in hand, I realized something profound: they no longer mattered. Not because I hated them, though I had every right to, but because I had finally learned to love myself enough to let go. The journey wasn't easy. It started as a boy desperate for approval, someone willing to bend himself into shapes that didn't fit just to earn a glance, a smile, or a word of praise from people who never looked twice. And it ended here, in this small but warm space, where I built a life on my own terms. The diploma hanging above my desk wasn't there to impress anyone. It wasn't a trophy or a symbol of external validation. It was simply proof, for me, that I had done something extraordinary despite everything stacked against me. One evening, as soft jazz played in the background and the city lights shimmered through my window, I sat under that diploma, reflecting on how far I'd come. My phone lay on the table beside me, its screen lighting up sporadically with missed calls and unread messages. Some were from my mom, others from distant relatives who only reached out when they needed something. Occasionally, an unknown number would appear, leaving voicemails I never listened to. But none of it stirred me anymore. I opened my journal and began writing, letting the pen glide across the pages like water flowing freely. "I've forgiven them," I wrote, pausing for a moment to consider the words. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean allowing them back into my life. They taught me what not to become: a person who demands proof of worth from others. I don't need to prove anything to anyone, especially not to them. I am enough. I always have been. Closing the journal, I leaned back in my chair, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. This was freedom, not the kind that came with loud declarations or dramatic gestures, but the quiet, steady kind that settled deep within your soul. Later that night, Laura arrived with dinner she'd prepared earlier, a fragrant vegetable curry accompanied by homemade naan bread. She hummed softly as she set the plates on the mismatched dining table we'd pieced together from thrift store finds. Her presence filled the room with warmth, her laughter echoing off the walls like music. "Did you finish that project?" she asked, pouring wine into two mismatched glasses. "Yeah," I replied, smiling as I remembered the freelance design work I'd completed earlier that week. "Client loved it." "That's my guy," she teased, nudging me playfully before taking a sip of her drink. We ate together, talking about everything and nothing, the way couples do when they're comfortable in each other's company. There was no pretense, no hidden agendas, just pure connection. Thomas had been right when he said some families lift you up while others tear you apart. Mine had done both, but Laura and my friends had helped me rebuild stronger than before. As the night wore on, we moved to the couch, sharing stories and laughing at old memories. The apartment felt alive, vibrant in a way it hadn't been during those early days when I first moved in. Back then, it was merely a shelter, a place to escape. Now, it was home, a sanctuary built not out of necessity but out of choice. Before bed, I glanced at the diploma one last time. Its simple black frame blended seamlessly with the rest of the decor, yet it stood out as a testament to resilience. I didn't need anyone else to acknowledge my achievements. I had already given myself permission to be proud.